Leadership isn't theory. It's pressure. Responsibility. Decisions that matter. This is the Real Leadership Brief. Conversations with leaders shaped by experience. Tested under pressure. And accountable for the outcome.
Welcome, everybody, to the Real Leadership Brief. I am Don, and today's guest, Mr. Rich Ashton. He's a 45-year of real-world leadership expert, building, turning around, operating, and selling businesses across multiple industries. A lifelong advocate for integrity, driven culture, exceptional customer service, and employee-first leadership. A master teacher of leaders whose greatest passion is developing people professionally and personally through experience, wisdom, and mentorship. Welcome to the show, Mr. Rich Ashton. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Don. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the time.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So why don't we kind of dive back into the history a little bit? What brought you into these businesses, and how did leadership kind of build this career?
So I'll start before I was in small business because I had a great foundation. I was lucky to get hired once I got out of the Navy by a company called Trammell Crow, a large real estate development company. And I worked for them for 10 years. I was one of the few people in the company without a college degree. Most of them had MBAs, frequently from Ivy League schools. So I was amongst people who were way smarter than I was. And I found that I always had thought that I could outwork people, but I found that not only were they smarter than me, that they could work at least as hard as I could. But they were based in integrity and people development, doing business the right way. And I got a tremendous foundation back during that time, which it made up the gap for me not finishing college and certainly not having an MBA. I became a partner in that company in the late 70s, and then decided that real estate development was not my passion. That small business was where I really wanted to be. So I sold my interest back to my partners in that company and moved into the small business world.
So I have to ask, and it's because there for a short period of my life. I mean, I have personally myself, I've owned companies. I owned a trucking company when I first got out of the military for about 6-7 years. And then COVID happened and I closed the company down, and I've worked for big manufacturing, as in the manager level there as well. The one thing that I always ask veterans is, have you noticed that is there a difference between leadership style and requirements of the way the leaders lead in the military compared to the way you have to adjust that leadership style to the manufacturing or business world?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me give you two different answers to it, basically. So the military is the biggest of big organizations, and their style has to be geared toward the number of people that they are that you're leading, and then the accountability in the military is far different from the accountability in business of any size. Ultimately, in the military, you're saving lives.
Yes.
That's a lot different than saving balance sheets, and so that's my first answer. The second is that the best leadership book that I have ever come across is Extreme Ownership, written by two ex-Navy SEALs. And they do a great job of using a principle illustrated by a combat example and then illustrated by a business example, since they're now business consultants. So as much as I think the military leadership style is different, I'd be lying if I didn't say that those guys have laid a great foundation for leadership at all levels.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I always told the people underneath me was, so many people look at the military leadership style but they forget how much money is spent in all the way up those ranks in teaching leadership. There's no business out there that has the amount of schools that the military has just to teach that primary principle of how to lead, right?
Sure.
So it's no different than being a master mechanic. You're an expert at that one topic. Well, when you get that many schools in the military, it gives you a very well-rounded expertise in leadership, right? Where it becomes tricky is how do you take away that sense of urgency and still keep the care for the people and get them to make the widgets that you need, to make the quotas, to make the company successful so that everybody keeps jobs and big America keeps becoming bigger and stronger.
And I was going to add a comment about that because you're hitting on something that's very, very true. Small businesses are so totally different from large businesses in that one of the fun things for someone like me who's an entrepreneur is that I always got to do 8 or 10 things in a day, where if I was with a larger organization or in the military, you tended to do 1, 2, or 3 things and you did them well and you did them repetitively. But I always enjoyed the variation. I'm a little ADD, and so it was good for me to be able to move through several things in a day. People who are classically trained in leadership find the small business environment chaotic. And those of us who are entrepreneurs find it exhilarating. So it's a totally different style of leadership in the small business.
Yeah, 100%. And there is, I don't want all my veterans to say, yeah, military leadership is the way to go, because there's things that doesn't cross over. Right. And, not always can you put the people first when it comes on the company side, like you can in the military. You can put your troops first. It's expected. And that's the way a good leader leads. You lead from the front. You can lead from the front in the company, but you've got to make sure that the company is successful at that same time. So, not having rules and so forth.
I agree with that, but I have always found that your company will be far more successful when you are able to equip and empower your employees.
Yes.
I lead not from a position of authority, but from a position of empowerment. And the more that I can leverage my time through building employees into better and better leaders, the more effective the organizations have been.
Oh, 100%. The part that is important, and I think the side that gets missed on so many CEOs, is they forget that you need to train your people to work above the level they're at, because otherwise what you created was stagnant robots that don't want to think for themselves. And that's not,
and in small business, you reach a point of growth where you stagnate. If you can't offload some of your responsibilities, in my case, like most entrepreneurs, I'm good at several things, but I have done other things that I'm not as good at. And so I'm not particularly skilled in operations. When it's time for me to have an operations manager, the choice is, do I promote somebody from within who's probably not ready to be a leader? Or do I bring someone from outside who's trained as a leader, but hasn't been trained in small business? And I generally found that I was better off taking people who were steeped in the cultures of our company and making leaders out of them than I was trying to bring somebody from outside into the organization. Not only were they frustrated, but typically the people that they were leading in the small business were frustrated too.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think even if that meant, going outside your company and hiring somebody to help teach leadership skills or something, it is way better to promote within and have, because you've got a history there of work ethic and everything else to rate, versus that other person that you're not going to know any of the back history. You just know what's on paper. And, I much trust what I know versus what I'd like to know,
Absolutely.
So you talk about the, and this is a good segue into this. You talk about the magic of teaching motivated employees to become leaders. What unlocks that transformation?
Several things. The way we started our leadership program was to identify what the leadership ceilings were on each of the employees that we brought into the program. We're all taught, some by life, some by the way we were raised, some by other leaders, what we can't do, more than what we can do. And so when I can sit down with somebody and say, you're showing me a spark of leadership, tell me what's holding you back, because I see you fail here and I see you not be comfortable here. So talk to me about it. And once we identify what that is, then we can start to build on that knowledge. And so, our company's small. Our leadership team began with 8 people. It ultimately was winnowed down to 6, but it's easy to have a very close relationship with 6 or 8 people and understand the things that are holding them back. In some cases, it was emotional. In some cases, they've never been exposed to leadership, really. Yeah. And even though they had worked under leaders, they didn't take that modeled behavior and apply it to themselves. My companies typically were blue collar companies, and an excellent installer or an excellent technician was very comfortable being good at what they were good at. But the thought that they would one day lead a group of technicians or a group of installers was a little bit foreign. So you have to take it piece by piece, and you have to give them some successes along the way. There are people who don't want to be leaders. They think they want to be leaders. You find out pretty quickly that that's not really a comfort zone for them. So you move on from them. But I think finding out where a person's current ceiling is the absolute smartest place to be in the process.
Yeah, I agree. I had never heard of it like that, but you are right. The one thing that I always went in and was teaching subordinates that were already in the supervisor position, your frontline supervisors, is, the first part is you have to realize you're not here for the money and you're not here for the control. If you want to be a great leader, then you have to put your care for the people in front of you, meaning give them the tools that they need to make their job easier so that they in return can be more productive for yourself. And make sure that you know them well enough to where when you start seeing somebody come in with a very bad attitude, and you can tell whether that's like them or not like them, maybe you can help with a situation that's going on outside those doors that in return, solving that situation will help them become more productive for yourself as well. And
yeah. Did you find that you were occasionally surprised as you were you'd identified somebody as a potential leader and you saw them run up against a wall that they just didn't want to get through or get over?
Oh, 100%. I'm not going to say the name of the company, but I worked for a company and I promoted a young leader. And my mistake was I promoted him. He had never been a supervisor before, and he was starting out on the night crew where he had the least amount of support, right? And that was my fault. I should have put him in a different position to give him that foundation to learn on. But what I found happening was when I would sit down with him, I got one version. At night, there was another version, and it was like the dictator came out, and it was like, do it my way. It's the only way, and so forth. And I think that happens with all young leaders. The problem was that when things failed, he had nobody else to share blame. And he sometimes would have to make that choice. Do I make it sound like it wasn't my fault, or do I just accept the blame because nobody was supporting me? And it was because of the way he was leading.
Yeah, absolutely. And those guys, that particular attitude is one that's very, very hard to turn around.
It is. Yes, I agree. So what is some of the most common mistakes companies make when trying to grow these leaders? We just discussed an example I gave where I made that mistake of putting somebody in a situation that, had I not done it that way, maybe his leadership would have grew a different way.
So I think fundamentally in small business, it isn't that they make the mistake. It's just leadership training cannot be a priority in most small businesses. You have too many other priorities, too many times your hair's on fire, and you have to get product out the door, or you have to get invoices collected or whatever. So even if the leader of the organization is a good leader, the likelihood that he or she has time to actually put together a leadership training program is very seldom. I was lucky. By the time we put our training program in place, I was working through a general manager who took the day-to-day responsibilities off of my shoulders, and it gave me a chance to think about my ultimate exit from the company. And I determined that I really wanted to leave it in the hands of existing employees. And so I was motivated to create the training program. The obstacles to first line managers are usually the one that you mentioned, kind of an authoritarian, my way or the highway, emotional leadership. I'm insecure, or I make decisions based on who I like, and then just a failure to take accountability. And leadership requires a much higher level of accountability than just being an employee. And not everybody is comfortable accepting that level of accountability.
Yeah, I think, there's a saying that happens all the time. And this falls on that middle staff area to nip this in the bud. Because otherwise you are skipping an excellent point of way to teach a foundational mistake. And those young leaders, when they have to balance between pleasing the supervisor and keeping the employees happy, and they're in that middle area, the mistake they tend to make isn't so much as going up to the person to telling them what to do. It's how they say it. It's, hey, look, I know this sucks, but Don wants it done this way, and I don't have no choice, but Don's making us do it. Mm-hmm. Well, now what you have done is you have, one, put yourself in a situation where you've shown that you don't have any communication skills. You don't have any backbone. You're not standing up for nobody, right? And now you're playing that double agent, because you're going to come back to me and say, I just can't get these guys to do it. Well, it's 9 times out of 10, it's because of the way you put it out to them.
Yeah, you're 100% right, and I'm not sure everybody understands that. But if you go to 100 different organizations and say, why is your organization screwed up? You'll get 100 answers that are the same. It'll be poor communication.
Yeah. Yep.
After I got done doing the training course, I wrote a book based on the course that I developed. And the very first section in the book is all about communication. And the communication at its best is circular. You begin with the item that you want to communicate. You then check and make sure that the person you communicated to understood. If it requires action, as it normally does, you monitor progress on the action, and then you come back around and close the circle and say, what happened as a result of our communication? Was it successful or was it not successful? And if it wasn't successful, you've got a little bit more work to do on that circle. But I find that more communication is left open-ended. It's communicated, but it's never followed up on, and the circle is never closed. And so the answer is, I told them what to do, but I never checked on it. Yep. And so I'm frustrated that my communication wasn't followed. The fact may be the person never understood what you said in the first place. And so if you don't make communication an ongoing circle, it just often doesn't work.
Yeah, especially if that directive went from you to one person to a group of people, that's just one level of watering down. But by the time all those other people heard it, it may have been completely changed. And now nobody understands what the original desire or need was.
The other thing you said is a supervisor gets frustrated and says, well, those are Don's rules, and so you need to follow them for that reason. Well, they've just eliminated the need for their job. They've made Don, the authority, and they've reduced their own position. Very few frontline supervisors, first-time supervisors particularly, understand that concept.
Yeah, because what they need to realize is those weren't Don's rules. Those are the company's rules.
Correct.
That was a company decision made by the leadership team. Don did not make these decisions.
Exactly.
He was one person, part of a team that made these, and now that is the directive of the company. And we all work for that same thing on Friday, a paycheck, you know, and the moment we stop putting the company at a point where it's going to be successful, well, so does our paychecks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to dive into this a little bit. Can you share a moment when a team surprised you in a difficult situation or a difficult decision?
Well, I can tell you a style that was very disappointing to me.
Okay.
We had a really terrific long-term employee, and he began with us as a salesperson. He became an absolutely outstanding salesperson. And in a small company, you need people to do more than one thing, as I said, and we needed him. He was the obvious authority in his division. We needed him to rise to the level of leader of that division. And he wanted it. He had a college degree, which one of the few in the company that did. And I poured everything I could into him, trying to teach him to lead. And I don't think it's fair to say that he didn't want to, because he did want to, but he wasn't able to. And I'm a believer in people. I love to see people succeed. And when people don't succeed, it really bothers me. And I consider it as much my failure as theirs. But after 20 years of that employee, and he did a terrific job selling for us, made us a lot of money. But at the end of the day, we had to part ways because he just couldn't be what we needed him to be. He shared our values. He was a good guy, but he reached a plateau. And once you reach a plateau, the business stops growing if you can't grow with it. So yeah. I would say that was one of those times that was really disappointing. And I don't know what else we could have done. I even changed. I had the general manager work with him directly to see if maybe my style was not working. He ran up against the exact same walls, and it was really disheartening.
Yeah. Would you say that ego plays a lot in where that plateau hits, where some people just say, you know what, I don't need to learn no more. I am the subject matter expert.
He didn't feel that. He did have an ego in it, and he kind of refused to do some of the remedial tasks and learn leadership because he felt like he was beyond that in some cases. Mm-hmm. So that's where his ego came in. But ultimately, it was more of a horsepower issue than it was ego issue.
Yeah. Okay. So you've shaped people, not just professionally, but personally. Right. Why can't those two things be separated?
Maybe I don't want to separate them. I think, frankly, I think that's one of the great things about a small business. I have told many people, I have a different relationship with everyone in my life, whether it's my family, my friends, people that I work with. And I value having a different relationship with everybody, so that if you and I are friends, you and I are going to have a connection that is unique to the two of us. And that means that every time we get together, you're going to share some information with me that maybe you wouldn't share with somebody else. I love that. And I find that as a leader, my responsibility is to influence people first. And the more I know about you, the further down in your life we're connected. If I know your family, if I know issues that you go through in your life, then I'm better off connected. And at some point, you'll probably come to me and say, Rich, I'm struggling with this. Is this an area that you can help me with? Well, I love being asked that question. Now, do I cross the line? I don't. I don't give marital advice, for instance. Right. That's a losing proposition. But I've given parenting advice lots of times, and I'd say the vast majority of the time it's been really well received. I've used the example often of a lady in our organization who I couldn't break through with. And it took a year, and she was very closed off. And I think part of it had to do with just never having had a relationship with the owner of a company. Mm-hmm. And I I continued to interact with her. I didn't press it, but I continued to be who I was. And there was ultimately a problem, or not a problem. There was a funny situation that happened one weekend with her son on the football field, and she had lost her temper with a referee. And she told me that story for whatever reason. Well, I've done the same thing. And so we connected that day around that story. That was the breakthrough. It took a year for me to break through with her. Well, the interesting thing is she was a good employee. She was not a great employee. That opened up a capability in her that allowed her. She's now in a supervisory role 2 years later, and she's doing a bang up job. But the closed off person who came into our organization could never have accomplished the things that she's now accomplishing. So, I mean, when I say that, I probably like that, I mean, there's no question I like it. I like working with people I know. I like working with people I like. I don't like all of them the same, but I love having a relationship with everybody that I come in contact with.
Yeah, I think that's important because at the end of the day, what we're, down to is our life experiences. That's really all we have to stand on. And if you're closed-minded, well, you don't get to learn lessons from other people's life experiences.
Correct.
It forces you to learn those lessons the hard way when maybe you could have been able to learn it from another person. And I think as a leader, those life experiences also help you build your leadership style, because that's what you ultimately can fall back on.
Yeah, I am example one of what you just said. I have leaders and mentors in my life, many of whom don't even know that they have mentored me, just because entrepreneurs tend to run in packs. So I have a lot of entrepreneurial friends. In my early 40s, my career had stagnated somewhat, and I had to do some soul searching. And I said, I'm so direct with people. It's not paying the dividends I want it to pay. And I began to look at some of my friends who were having more success. And I saw how they were handling people, exact same situation, but they were handling it different. And they were getting far better results than I was. And so sometimes I asked them questions. Sometimes I just observed. But the list of mentors in my life is long. And it starts with my wife. My wife is exactly the opposite of me in most of our characteristics. Where I am harsh and judgmental, she's gracious and forgiving. And I spent about 20 years of our marriage hoping that she'd become more like me. And I finally woke up and said, the one of us that needs to change is me. And I wish that I were more like her in many of these areas, not in business areas, but in relationship areas. One of the best decisions I ever made was to turn to my wife and let her be a teacher to me too.
Yeah. I can't stress how correct you are there. Me and my wife are the same way. She's 100% different than me. And, I'm 100% different than what I was before the military. So even the mentoring I got through the military changed me a little bit. And one of the things that I always told other people was, look, at the end of the day, you're going to remember the name of that person that you couldn't stand and who was a horrible leader way longer than you'll remember the name of the person that helped you the most. And the reason why is because that horrible leader, that guy that just failed at everything and couldn't get anything done right because of his leadership style, taught you so much more than anybody else. Every day he showed you a shining example of what not to do.
Yep.
You just had to write it down, And I think those life experiences become very important especially to young, right out of college age level people that are trying to learn. Those are big learning lessons right there.
Oh, I agree, and I do think that even though a recent college graduate feels like they probably have gotten a decent exposure to leadership, there's an awful lot more to learn, and it's great stuff. It's fun learning it, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree. So you've been speaking since your teenage years. What have you learned about influence and communication?
Good question. I was lucky in that my dad kind of pushed me toward leadership as far back as I can remember. And so it just seemed very natural for me to get up and talk in front of groups. And I probably wasn't very good at it at first. I learned that. Just like everything else, you learn by watching other people. In my book, I wrote a chapter about inspiration and the importance of inspiration. You don't have to use it all the time, but I happened across an episode of 30 for 30 by ESPN about Jim Valvano and the year that he won the national championship. And then he went on to raise a lot of money for cancer research while he was suffering from cancer. And he was so inspirational. And I know that I'll never be him, but I was able to pick out certain things about how he delivered his speeches and how people can feel your passion. And it's much more important that they feel your passion than feel your words. And so I think I copied a lot of other people to develop the inspirational style that I can deliver when called upon. I think it's a piece of leadership that if you don't have it, you've got a void in your toolkit. I think it's something that even though it may be difficult for you to develop, I think it's absolutely necessary. You don't want to go into every meeting trying to inspire people, but inspiration used in small doses is really, really powerful.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think finding that balance between leadership or between inspiration and, I'm not going to say scolding, but, corrective leadership, I guess would be a good term for it. That balance there becomes important.
Well, if you vary your message, you have a much greater chance of people listening to you. They don't know when you start the weekly meeting, they don't know what direction it's going, so they better be paying attention.
Yeah.
I use a lot of humor. I like to use stories because they make the lessons stick more. I use inspiration rarely, but effectively. And there are times when meetings are very harsh. But as long as you don't have an abundance of any of those, and as long as you're not boring, getting people to listen to your message is not that difficult.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, we're getting close to the top of the hour here. Let me ask you this. For all the young leaders out there that are going to be going forward and changing the way corporate America is, and even the small entrepreneur that is starting that new business, what message do you feel most that they need to know?
Pursue knowledge. I think the best advice that I ever received, I was 24 years old and my boss was 23. He was a Harvard MBA with an undergraduate electrical engineering degree from MIT. And he was really, really smart, especially for his age. And he said, "Rich, you don't know much about business, do you?" And I said, "I do not." He said, "I want you to read 5 business periodicals every single week, and I want you to read the Wall Street Journal every day." That began me on a lifetime journey of reading and gathering information. I read or listen to podcast audiobooks roughly an hour and a half every single day. I read on a variety of topics, not just business. In fact, my rule is that if I read one type of book today, then I'm going to read 4 different kind of books before I return to that subject. And so it forces me to learn a lot of different stuff. It gets back to influence. The more you understand about how people think, why they do the things they do, the more you understand about the world, the more effective your communication style is, the more effective, obviously, your influence is in the long run.
Yeah, I agree. Man, that is some big news right there, because our world is changing so much. And I think podcasting is an amazing tool. I really do. There's on average 36,000 new episodes a day coming out. I guarantee you there's topics about things that you've never even known about. But the one thing that you're going to get from each of those, I hope anyways, is that the person providing it is passionate about it. And it gives you that opportunity to learn, but it gives you that opportunity to question things as well. And that forces you to strive for more knowledge and learning more about those topics. I think newspapers and reading are extremely important. I wish I would have had the same person push me at a younger age to do it. And I have found myself, even though I love listening to podcasts, I just can't get into digital formed newspapers. Right? I still prefer to hold a newspaper and read it that way. But those are some valuable tools that the newer generation, I think, forgets about. They get wrapped up in the rat race and forget about their own self ability to continuously keep learning.
If you don't mind, I'm going to get in a quick plug for my book because it's unique. There's a lot of leadership information out there. There's not much that's aimed at small business. And that's the reason that I ultimately published my leadership thoughts into a book aimed at small business. The book is called Growing Your Own, as in growing your own leaders. The website is growingyourown.net.
Okay.
It is an easy read. It's very down to earth. There's no theory. There's no jargon in it. It's just extremely practical. And if someone is on the verge of becoming a leader or has recently become a leader, I guarantee that the 2 hours it takes to read that book or listen to that book will set you on a path that will put you ahead of your peers.
Absolutely. That's exactly where we were getting to. Is there any other place that you would like people to go and visit and follow and all those good things?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. I don't do much other social media, but I just especially would direct them to the growingyourown.net website. That has all the information on it.
Okay. Well, I hope all of you guys out there, and especially the younger guys and gals that are out there and getting ready to pursue careers, now is the time to learn. And now is the time to make the mistakes that you will learn from. So without a doubt, take a little bit of knowledge that Mr. Rich was kind enough to share with us today. Make sure you pick up a book, read, audio, it doesn't matter, but gain that knowledge. And it's going to give you dividends down the road. So I appreciate all of you guys who listen. Thank you so much. Y'all take care, be safe, and have a great day.
You've been listening to The Real Leadership Brief, a podcast from the Barracks Media Network. Thanks to our guest for sharing their experience, and thank you for listening. You can find more conversations like this across the Barracks Media Network. We'll see you next time.